The morning sun cast long shadows across the concrete courtyard of Dragon's Fist Martial Arts Academy. Marcus Chen adjusted his crisp white belt for the third time, his palms sweaty despite the cool October air. At 22, he had finally worked up the courage to join a martial arts school, driven by years of watching action movies and dreaming of becoming something more than just another office worker pushing papers at his father's accounting firm. The academy buzzed with activity as students of various skill levels practiced their forms. Marcus watched in awe as black belts moved with fluid precision, their techniques sharp and controlled. He had been attending classes for only 2 months, barely learning basic stances and simple punches. His instructor, Master Wong, constantly reminded beginners about patience and humility, but Marcus found himself growing restless with the slow pace of learning. "Remember, young grasshopper," Master Wong had said during his last lesson, "a white belt is not a sign of weakness but the beginning of a journey. Do not rush to pick fights with those beyond your skill level." But Marcus had always been competitive. In high school, he excelled at basketball despite his average height through sheer determination and an almost reckless confidence. In college, he graduated summa cum laude by outworking everyone around him. Now facing the mundane routine of his day job, martial arts represented his chance to prove himself once again. The academy's bulletin board caught his attention as he walked toward the changing room. Among the usual announcements about tournament schedules and belt testing dates, one flyer stood out. It advertised a special demonstration by the Royal Guards of the Thai Palace, who would be visiting the city as part of a cultural exchange program. The event was scheduled for Saturday afternoon at the downtown Civic Center. Marcus had heard stories about these elite warriors. The Royal Guards were not just ceremonial figures but highly trained martial artists who underwent years of rigorous training in ancient combat techniques. They served as the personal protectors of the Thai royal family and were renowned throughout Southeast Asia for their exceptional skills. The flyer mentioned they would be demonstrating traditional Muay Thai techniques and would offer friendly sparring sessions with local martial artists. His mind began racing with possibilities. This could be his chance to test himself against world-class fighters, to see how far natural talent and determination could take him. Marcus had always believed that formal training was just one path to excellence, and that raw ability and courage could sometimes overcome years of study. During that evening's class, Marcus struggled to concentrate on the basic forms Master Wong was teaching. His kicks lacked precision and his punches felt sluggish. All he could think about was Saturday's demonstration and the opportunity it presented. "Your mind is elsewhere tonight, Marcus," Master Wong observed after class. "A distracted student learns nothing." "I'm sorry, Master Wong, I was thinking about the Royal Guard demonstration this weekend." The elderly instructor's expression grew serious. "Ah, yes, I saw the announcement. These are exceptional warriors, trained from childhood in ways that most Western martial artists never experience. They represent centuries of martial tradition." "I was thinking of participating in the sparring session," Marcus said, trying to sound casual. Master Wong studied him carefully. "Marcus, you have enthusiasm, which is admirable. But enthusiasm without wisdom can lead to injury, both physical and to one's pride. These guards are not beginners who will hold back to protect your feelings. But wouldn't it be a great learning experience? Even if I lose, I could learn so much from facing someone of that caliber." "Learning comes from being ready to receive the lesson," Master Wong replied. "Tell me, what do you hope to achieve by facing a royal guard?" Marcus hesitated. The truth was complicated. Part of him genuinely wanted to test his abilities and learn from the experience. But another part, the part that had driven him to excel in everything else, simply wanted to prove that he was special, that he could accomplish something remarkable despite his limited training. "I want to see how I measure up," he said finally. Master Wong nodded slowly. Measuring oneself against others can be useful, but only when done with the right intentions and preparation. "Promise me you will think carefully about this decision. The Royal Guards command respect throughout the martial arts world for good reason." That night Marcus lay in bed staring at the ceiling, his mind churning with thoughts of Saturday's event. He had always been someone who seized opportunities when they presented themselves. In business school, he had landed a prestigious internship by boldly approaching a CEO at a networking event, despite having no connections or inside knowledge. His approach had been direct and confident, qualities that had served him well in many situations. He began researching the Royal Guards online, finding videos of their training and performances. Their techniques were indeed impressive, but Marcus noticed they followed traditional patterns and forms. He wondered if their rigid adherence to ancient methods might actually be a weakness against someone unpredictable and unconventional. By Friday morning, Marcus had made his decision. He would attend the demonstration and volunteer for the sparring session. He spent his lunch break shopping for new training gear, selecting protective equipment and a fresh uniform. At a sporting goods store, the elderly clerk, himself a martial arts practitioner, noticed Marcus's white belt. "Planning to spar with the Royal Guards, eh?" the clerk asked with a knowing smile. "How did you know?" "I've been in this business for 30 years. I can spot the ambitious young fighters from a mile away. They all have that same look in their eyes, part determination, part delusion." Marcus bristled at the word delusion, but kept his response polite. "Any advice?" he asked. The clerk leaned across the counter. "Yeah, remember that confidence and arrogance are different things, and the difference becomes very clear very quickly when you're facing someone who really knows what they're doing." As Marcus left the store, the clerk's words echoed in his mind, but his resolve remained firm. Tomorrow would be his day to prove that heart and determination could triumph over formal training and tradition. He had no idea that his decision would set in motion events that would change not only his own perspective on martial arts, but also create a moment that spectators would talk about for years to come. The stage was set for an encounter that would test everything Marcus thought he knew about fighting, respect, and the true meaning of martial arts mastery. Saturday afternoon arrived with perfect weather for the outdoor demonstration. The downtown Civic Center's main plaza had been transformed into an arena, with hundreds of folding chairs arranged in a semicircle around a large matted area. Food vendors lined the perimeter, filling the air with the sense of Thai cuisine, while colorful banners displaying the Royal Guard emblem fluttered in the gentle breeze. Marcus arrived early, his new gear bag slung over his shoulder, and nervous energy coursing through his veins. He had barely slept the night before, alternating between excitement and doubt. The morning had been spent practicing basic techniques in his apartment, throwing punches and kicks at imaginary opponents while visualizing his upcoming performance. The crowd was larger than he had expected. Local martial arts schools had brought their students, creating a sea of different colored belts and uniforms. Marcus recognized several faces from his own academy, including some advanced students who nodded politely in his direction. He noticed their surprised expressions when they saw his sparring gear and realized his intentions. "Marcus," called a familiar voice. He turned to see Jennifer Walsh, a brown belt from his school who had always been encouraging during his training. She approached with a concerned expression. "Please tell me you're not planning to spar with the Royal Guards today." "Why shouldn't I?" Marcus replied, trying to project confidence he didn't entirely feel. "Because you've been training for 2 months and they've been training for decades. This isn't a movie where the underdog miraculously wins through determination alone." "I'm not expecting to win," Marcus said, though part of him wasn't entirely sure that was true. "I just want to test myself and learn." Jennifer shook her head. "There are better ways to learn that won't result in you getting seriously hurt or embarrassing yourself in front of hundreds of people." Before Marcus could respond, a hush fell over the crowd. The Royal Guards had arrived. 5 men in traditional Thai ceremonial uniforms emerged from a van parked near the demonstration area. Even from a distance, their presence was commanding. They moved with the fluid grace of professional athletes, each step deliberate and controlled. The lead guard, a man who appeared to be in his 40s with graying temples and intense dark eyes, surveyed the crowd with the calm assessment of someone accustomed to evaluating potential threats. Marcus studied them as they began their warm-up routine. Their techniques were indeed traditional, but executed with a precision and power that made his own training seem like child's play. When they practiced their kicks, the sharp snap of fabric cutting through air was audible even over the crowd's murmur. Their punches created brief whirlwinds of dust from the mats. The demonstration began with a formal presentation about the history and tradition of the Royal Guards. The lead guard, introduced as Commander Somsak Jaidi, spoke in accented but clear English about the centuries-old tradition of protecting the Thai monarchy through martial excellence. The way of the Royal Guard is not about individual glory or proving oneself superior to others. Commander JD explained to the audience. It is about discipline, respect, and the patient cultivation of skill over many years. We train not to defeat others, but to protect what we hold sacred. Marcus found himself focusing more on the commander's physical presence than his words. The man was not particularly large, standing perhaps 5 feet 8 inches tall, but he carried himself with an authority that made him seem larger. His movements during the presentation were economical and purposeful, never wasted or showy. The formal demonstration showcased various aspects of Royal Guard training. They performed traditional forms that flowed like deadly dances, their movements sharp and precise. They demonstrated self-defense techniques against multiple attackers, weapon training with ancient tie blades, and conditioning exercises that left the audience gasping in amazement. During a break in the presentation, Marcus noticed other martial artists from the crowd approaching the guards with respectful bows, engaging in quiet conversations about technique and training methods. The guards responded graciously, offering advice and answering questions with patience and humility. Finally, Commander JD announced that they would conclude with friendly sparring sessions for any local martial artists who wished to participate. "We welcome anyone who approaches with respect and a genuine desire to learn," he said. "This is not about winning or losing, but about sharing knowledge and testing oneself in a controlled environment." Several experienced black belts immediately stepped forward, forming a line near the demonstration area. Marcus watched as they engaged in brief but intense exchanges with the guards. Even these accomplished martial artists were clearly outmatched, but the guards controlled their techniques carefully, providing challenging but safe encounters that allowed their opponents to learn without suffering injury. Marcus's moment had arrived. His heart pounded as he walked toward the demonstration area, his white belt stark against his black uniform. Conversations around him gradually quieted as people noticed the beginner approaching the elite warriors. Commander JD noticed him first, his experienced eyes immediately assessing Marcus's skill level from his stance, his walk, and the obvious newness of his equipment. The commander's expression remained neutral, but Marcus caught a slight narrowing of his eyes that might have been concern or curiosity. "You wish to spar, young man?" Commander JD asked in his measured tone. "Yes, sir," Marcus replied, bowing awkwardly in what he hoped was an appropriate manner. The commander studied him for a long moment.
"How long have you been training in martial arts?"
2 months, sir." A ripple of whispers ran through the nearby crowd. Marcus heard someone say, "This is going to be a disaster," and another voice responding, "Someone should stop this." Commander JD's expression softened slightly. 2 months is a very short time in the martial arts journey. Perhaps you would benefit more from observing today and returning when you have more experience. Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks. This was exactly what he had expected. Everyone underestimating him because of his beginner status. "Sir, I understand I'm not experienced, but I believe I can hold my own. I've always been a quick learner and a good athlete." The commander exchanged glances with his fellow guards. Marcus caught what might have been amusement in their expressions, though they maintained their professional demeanor. "Very well," Commander JD said finally. "We will have a brief, controlled exchange. I will match your level of intensity and skill. The purpose is education, not competition." As Marcus began stretching and preparing his protective gear, he was unaware that his decision was creating quite a stir among the spectators. Several people were discreetly taking out their phones to record what many expected would be either a spectacular embarrassment or a brief, anticlimactic encounter. Master Wong had arrived late to the demonstration and was shocked to see his student preparing to face one of the royal guards. He immediately began making his way through the crowd, hoping to reach Marcus before the encounter began. The stage was set for a confrontation that would test not only Marcus's physical abilities, but also his understanding of what martial arts truly meant. The demonstration area fell silent as Marcus stepped onto the mats, his white belt a stark reminder of his inexperience. Commander JD moved with fluid grace to the center of the sparring area, his ceremonial uniform replaced by simple training clothes that somehow made him appear even more formidable. The contrast between the two fighters was striking. One a decorated warrior with decades of experience, the other an enthusiastic beginner driven by confidence that bordered on recklessness. Marcus tried to control his breathing as he adjusted his protective headgear and mouthpiece. His hands trembled slightly as he pulled on his sparring gloves, a detail he hoped the crowd wouldn't notice. The reality of the situation was beginning to sink in. Around him, hundreds of spectators watched with a mixture of anticipation and concern. Some had their phones ready to record what many expected would be a brief and decisive encounter. "Remember," Commander JD said quietly as they approached each other, "this is about learning, not proving anything. I will control my techniques to match your experience level. Do not try to overextend yourself." Marcus nodded, though internally he bristled at what felt like condescension. He had come here to test himself against the best, not to participate in what amounted to a training exercise. As they touched gloves in the traditional pre-sparring ritual, Marcus made a silent promise to himself that he would show everyone present that heart and determination could overcome formal training. The unofficial timekeeper, one of the other royal guards, called for the match to begin. Marcus immediately adopted the aggressive stance that had served him well in pickup basketball games and college intramural sports. He bounced lightly on his feet, hands raised high, trying to project an image of confident readiness. Commander JD, by contrast, stood in a perfectly balanced traditional Muay Thai stance, his weight evenly distributed, hands positioned with textbook precision. His expression remained calm and focused, showing no sign of the nervous energy that radiated from his opponent. Marcus decided to start with what he considered his strongest technique, a straight right punch that he had been practicing diligently in Master Wong's classes. He stepped forward and threw the punch with all the power and speed he could muster, aiming for the commander's solar plexus. What happened next would be replayed in Marcus's mind for years to come. Commander JD didn't dodge dramatically or counter with a devastating technique. Instead, he made the smallest possible adjustment to his position, causing Marcus's punch to miss by mere inches. The young fighter's momentum carried him slightly off balance, and he stumbled forward a step before recovering. The crowd murmured appreciatively at the commander's subtle defensive work. Marcus, however, interpreted the reaction as encouragement for his aggressive approach. He reset his stance and launched a combination attack. Left jab, right cross, left hook, techniques he had seen in countless boxing matches and had practiced against heavy bags. Each punch met empty air as Commander JD flowed around the attacks like water around stones. His movements were so economical that he barely seemed to be moving at all, yet Marcus found himself consistently punching at spaces where his opponent had been, rather than where he was. The feeling was deeply frustrating and disorienting. Growing desperate to land at least one solid technique, Marcus abandoned his basic boxing approach and attempted a high kick, something he had only recently learned and rarely practiced. The kick was telegraphed from the moment he began to lift his leg, giving Commander JD ample time to prepare his response. The commander caught Marcus's ankle effortlessly in one hand, holding it at chest level while maintaining perfect balance. For a moment, Marcus stood frozen in an awkward position, balanced on one leg with his other foot trapped in his opponent's grasp. The crowd held its collective breath, waiting to see what would happen next. "Your technique shows enthusiasm," Commander JD said conversationally, as if he weren't currently controlling his opponent's movement completely. "But you are fighting with emotion rather than strategy. In martial arts, the mind must be calm for the body to be effective." He released Marcus's foot gently, allowing the younger man to regain his footing without embarrassment. The gesture was clearly intended as a teaching moment rather than a humiliation, but Marcus's pride was stung nonetheless. He had expected to at least make the royal guard work to defend against his attacks, not to be casually controlled like a child. Abandoning all pretense of technique, Marcus charged forward with a wild haymaker punch, putting every ounce of his strength behind a right cross that would have knocked out most untrained opponents. Commander JD sidestepped the attack and in one fluid motion, swept Marcus's legs out from under him. The white belt found himself on his back, staring up at the afternoon sky while the commander stood calmly above him, not even breathing hard. The takedown had been executed with such perfect timing and control that Marcus felt no pain from the fall, only the shock of finding himself on the ground so suddenly. "Are you injured?" Commander JD asked, extending a hand to help Marcus to his feet. Marcus accepted the help, his face burning with embarrassment. "I'm fine," he muttered, though his pride was badly bruised. "Good. Shall we continue?" What Marcus didn't realize was that the commander was actually impressed by his determination. Most white belts would have been intimidated into timid, defensive fighting, but Marcus had maintained his aggressive approach, despite being clearly outmatched. There was something admirable about his refusal to be discouraged, even if his technique was severely lacking. The second round of their encounter began with Marcus trying a more cautious approach. He had learned that charging straight in was futile, so he began circling the commander looking for an opening. His footwork was clumsy compared to his opponent's graceful movement, but he was beginning to show some basic tactical thinking. Commander JD allowed him to circle for nearly a minute, occasionally throwing light, controlled techniques that Marcus was forced to defend against. Each defensive movement revealed more gaps in the white belt's training. His blocks were too wide, his counters too slow, his recovery time too long. Finally, Marcus saw what he thought was an opening. The commander appeared to drop his guard slightly while adjusting his stance. Marcus launched himself forward with a combination attack, putting together the best techniques he knew in rapid succession. This time, Commander JD didn't simply evade. He caught Marcus's leading punch in a traditional trap, redirected the second punch harmlessly past his body, and responded with a lightning-fast but carefully controlled strike that stopped just short of Marcus's throat. The technique was so fast that many in the crowd didn't see it until Commander JD held his position, his fist frozen inches from Marcus's windpipe. The message was clear. The fight could have been ended at any moment the commander chose. Marcus stood perfectly still, acutely aware of how completely he had been dominated. The commander's fist remained motionless for several seconds, not as a threat but as a teaching tool, allowing Marcus to understand exactly how vulnerable he had been throughout their encounter. When Commander JD finally lowered his hand and stepped back, Marcus realized that something fundamental had changed in his understanding of martial arts and his own abilities. The moment Commander JD's fist stopped inches from his throat marked a turning point in Marcus's understanding of martial arts. The crowd around them had fallen completely silent, mesmerized by the commander's display of absolute control and precision. Marcus could feel the heat of embarrassment flooding his face. But something deeper was happening within him, a fundamental shift in perspective that would reshape everything he thought he knew about fighting and strength. "Do you understand what just happened?" Commander JD asked quietly, maintaining his position for a few more seconds before finally stepping back. Marcus swallowed hard, his throat suddenly dry. "You could have knocked me out whenever you wanted to." "More than that," the commander replied, his tone gentle but instructive. "You have been completely vulnerable throughout our entire encounter. Every attack you launched created openings that could have been exploited. Every movement you made was telegraphed long before execution. You have been fighting with passion, which has energy, but without wisdom, which provides direction." The words hit Marcus harder than any physical blow could have. He had entered this confrontation believing that his natural athleticism and determination would somehow level the playing field against superior training and experience. The reality was humbling beyond anything he had ever experienced. Master Wong had finally reached the demonstration area and was watching from the edge of the mats with a concerned expression. He had seen enough students over the years let their egos override their judgment, but Marcus's situation was particularly stark. The young man's complete outmatching served as a powerful lesson, though Master Wong worried about how his student would process the experience. Commander JD seemed to sense Marcus's internal struggle. "Tell me, what was your goal when you decided to spar with me today?" Marcus hesitated, unsure how to articulate his motivations without sounding foolish. "I wanted to test myself against someone of your caliber. I thought maybe I could learn something or prove that raw talent could compete with formal training." "And what have you learned?" The question hung in the air while Marcus considered his answer carefully. The crowd remained attentively quiet, sensing that something important was unfolding beyond mere demonstration of fighting techniques. "I've learned that I don't know anything," Marcus said finally, his voice carrying a mixture of humility and frustration. "Everything I thought I understood about fighting was wrong." Commander JD nodded approvingly. "That is the beginning of true learning. Most people train for years without reaching that understanding. Your willingness to face someone far beyond your skill level, while perhaps unwise, has given you a valuable gift, the knowledge of how much you don't know." He gestured for Marcus to join him in the center of the demonstration area. "Show me your fighting stance again, the one you used when we began." Marcus resumed his earlier position, bouncing lightly on his feet with his hands held high. He could feel the crowd's attention focused on him, and his discomfort was evident in the tension of his shoulders and the uncertainty of his movements. "This stance tells me several things about you," Commander JD observed. "You are athletic and confident, which are valuable qualities. But you are also impatient and rely too heavily on aggression. Your weight distribution is poor for both offense and defense. Your hand position protects your head but leaves your body exposed. Most importantly, your mental state is agitated rather than calm." He demonstrated the proper traditional stance, explaining each element and its purpose. Martial arts is not about winning fights through superior force. It is about understanding the principles of movement, timing, distance, and psychology that govern all physical conflict. These principles must be learned slowly and practiced thousands of times before they become natural. Marcus tried to mirror the commander's stance, but his version looked awkward and forced compared to the fluid naturalness of his instructor. The differences were subtle but significant. Small adjustments in foot position, weight distribution, and arm angle that completely changed the effectiveness of the posture. "Better," Commander JD said encouragingly. "But you are thinking too hard about the physical position. The stance must come from understanding, not from copying movements. Why do we position the feet this way? Why do we hold our hands at this angle? When you understand the reasons, the position becomes natural." He began walking Marcus through basic principles, using their sparring session as a reference point. Each of Marcus's failed attacks was analyzed and corrected, not with criticism but with patient instruction about timing, distance, and technique. The crowd watched in fascination as the demonstration evolved from a sparring match into an impromptu masterclass. Commander JD's teaching style was unlike anything Marcus had experienced. Rather than drilling repetitive techniques, the commander focused on helping him understand the underlying concepts that made techniques effective. "When you threw your first punch," the commander explained, "you were thinking about hitting me rather than about the mechanics of an effective punch. Your focus was on the target rather than on your own movement. This created tension that slowed your technique and made your intention obvious to me." He had Marcus throw the same punch again, but this time with attention to his breathing, his balance, and the path of his arm through space. The difference was immediately apparent. The second punch was smoother, faster, and less telegraphed than the first. You see, the improvement comes not from trying harder, but from understanding better. For the next 20 minutes, Commander JD worked with Marcus in front of the entire crowd, transforming what had begun as a mismatch into a valuable learning experience for everyone present. Other martial artists in the audience found themselves taking mental notes as the commander explained concepts that applied to all styles and levels of training. Marcus's initial embarrassment began to fade as he realized that he was receiving instruction from one of the world's most skilled martial artists. The other royal guards occasionally offered comments or demonstrated points, creating an impromptu seminar that exceeded anything the crowd had expected from the day's events. "Your natural athleticism is actually an advantage," Commander JD told Marcus as they practiced basic defensive movements. "But only if you learn to channel it through proper technique. Many naturally gifted athletes struggle in martial arts because they rely on their physical abilities rather than developing their understanding." The comment sparked something in Marcus's mind. He had always prided himself on being able to excel at new activities quickly. But perhaps that very confidence had prevented him from approaching martial arts with the humility and patience it required. As their impromptu lesson continued, Marcus began to understand why Master Wong had emphasized the importance of fundamentals and gradual progression. Each basic movement contained layers of complexity that only became apparent through careful study and practice. What had seemed like overly cautious teaching methods now revealed themselves as necessary foundations for real skill development. The most profound moment came when Commander JD asked Marcus to attempt the same combination attack that had begun their sparring session. This time, however, Marcus was to focus on his own movement and technique rather than on trying to hit his opponent. The difference was remarkable. While the techniques were still clearly those of a beginner, they showed a smoothness and control that had been completely absent earlier. Marcus felt the difference as much as the observers could see it. His movements flowed more naturally, his balance remained centered, and his recovery was quicker. Now you are beginning to fight like a martial artist rather than like an angry person, Commander JD said with evident satisfaction. This is what 2 months of training can look like when combined with proper understanding and humility. The transformation in Marcus's approach was visible to everyone watching, but the most significant changes were happening inside his own mind. As Commander JD continued their impromptu lesson, Marcus found himself experiencing martial arts in a completely different way than he had during his 2 months of formal training. Now I want to show you something about distance and timing, Commander JD said, positioning himself at arm's length from Marcus. These are concepts that take years to master, but I can give you a glimpse of their importance. He had Marcus throw a slow-motion punch while he demonstrated how tiny adjustments in position could make the difference between a successful attack and complete failure. By moving just inches backward or to either side, the commander could cause Marcus's punch to fall short or miss entirely, while simultaneously creating opportunities for counterattacks. In our earlier sparring, you were so focused on trying to hit me that you ignored these fundamental considerations. You rushed into range without understanding distance, and you attacked without considering timing. These are not matters of strength or speed. They are matters of knowledge and patience. Marcus attempted to apply these concepts as they continued practicing, but the complexity was overwhelming. Every time he thought he understood one element, it seemed to conflict with another. Maintaining proper distance while creating opportunities for attack, timing his movements to exploit his opponent's vulnerabilities while protecting himself. It was like trying to solve a multidimensional puzzle while in motion. This is why we emphasize years of training, Commander JD explained, noticing Marcus's frustration. You are trying to understand in minutes what takes most students months to begin grasping. Do not be discouraged by the complexity. Instead, be inspired by how much there is to learn. The crowd had grown during their extended session, with people from other parts of the Civic Center drawn by word of the unusual demonstration. Master Wong made his way closer to the action, his expression showing a mixture of concern for his student and professional interest in the commander's teaching methods. Master Wong, Commander JD called out, having noticed the elderly instructor. Please join us. Your student shows promise, but I suspect he would benefit from your guidance in processing today's lessons. Master Wong bowed respectfully before stepping onto the mats. Commander, you honor us with your patience and instruction. Marcus is enthusiastic, but sometimes lacks the wisdom to match his determination. The combination of enthusiasm and ignorance is not uncommon in martial arts, the commander replied with a slight smile. In fact, it can be quite valuable when properly directed. Your student's willingness to face overwhelming odds while foolish in practical terms demonstrates a spirit that can be cultivated into something exceptional. Marcus felt a complex mix of emotions as his instructor joined the discussion. He was grateful for the commander's praise, but embarrassed that his teacher had witnessed his earlier defeat so completely. More than anything, he was beginning to understand how much he had taken Master Wong's patient instruction for granted. Perhaps you could show us the difference between aggressive confidence and controlled confidence, Master Wong suggested to Commander JD. The commander nodded and asked Marcus to resume his original fighting stance. Attack me again with the same combination you used earlier. But this time I want you to observe my state of mind rather than focus on trying to hit me. Marcus launched the same sequence of punches that had begun their sparring session, but now he was able to observe Commander JD's response with greater awareness. The commander's defensive movements were not hurried or reactive. They flowed with an almost meditative calm that seemed to anticipate each attack before it was fully launched. Do you see the difference? Master Wong asked. Commander JD is not fighting against your attacks. He is responding to them with complete awareness and control. His confidence comes from knowledge and preparation, not from aggression or the desire to prove himself. The lesson continued with both instructors taking turns demonstrating different aspects of martial arts philosophy and technique. Marcus found himself learning more in one afternoon than he had absorbed in his 2 months of regular classes. But he also realized that the lessons would take much longer to internalize and apply effectively. Of the other royal guards approached and spoke quietly to Commander JD and Tai. The commander nodded and turned back to Marcus in the crowd. We must conclude our formal demonstration soon, he announced. But before we finish, I would like Marcus to show everyone what he has learned today. The suggestion sent a wave of nervousness through Marcus. He had been comfortable learning in the relatively private setting of working with the commander, but the idea of demonstrating his newfound understanding in front of hundreds of spectators was intimidating. "I'm not sure I'm ready for that," Marcus said honestly. "Readiness is not the goal," Commander JD replied. "Understanding is the goal. Show us not what you have perfected, but what you have begun to understand." With encouragement from both instructors, Marcus moved through some of the basic techniques they had been practicing. His movements were still clearly those of a beginner, but they showed a quality that had been completely absent earlier: mindfulness and control rather than aggressive desperation. The crowd responded with genuine appreciation, recognizing the dramatic improvement in his approach, even if his technical skill remained limited. Several experienced martial artists in the audience nodded approvingly at the transformation they had witnessed. "Ladies and gentlemen," Commander JD addressed the crowd, "you have witnessed something more valuable than any sparring victory today. You have seen a student begin the journey from ignorance to understanding. Marcus came here believing he could rely on natural ability and determination to compete with trained skill. He discovered that knowledge and wisdom are more powerful than raw talent." He placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder, but more importantly, when faced with the reality of his limitations, he did not become defensive or make excuses. He listened, learned, and began to change his approach. This is the mark of a student who will eventually achieve real skill. The formal ceremony concluded with Commander JD presenting Marcus with a small medal bearing the Royal Guard emblem. "This is not an award for fighting ability," he explained. "It is recognition of your willingness to learn and your courage in facing difficult truths about yourself." As the crowd began to disperse, many people approached Marcus to congratulate him on his experience and his attitude during the lesson. The weeks following the demonstration marked a period of profound change in Marcus's approach to martial arts and life in general. The medal from Commander JD sat prominently on his desk at work, serving as a daily reminder of the lessons he had learned that Saturday afternoon. But the real transformation was happening in ways that weren't immediately visible to others. When Marcus returned to Master Wong's academy the following Monday, his classmates were buzzing with excitement about the videos that had begun circulating online. Someone had recorded portions of his encounter with the Royal Guard, and the footage had spread throughout the local martial arts community. To Marcus's surprise, most of the comments were positive, praising his willingness to learn and his respectful attitude during the extended lesson. "I expected to be a laughingstock," Marcus confided to Jennifer Walsh as they prepared for class. "Are you kidding?" she replied. "Half the black belts I know wouldn't have had the courage to step onto those mats with a Royal Guard, and none of them would have handled being outclassed so gracefully, Master." Wong approached them with his usual measured pace. "Marcus, I trust you have had time to reflect on your experience with Commander JD." "More than I wanted to," Marcus admitted. "I keep thinking about how wrong I was about everything. It's actually kind of embarrassing." "Embarrassment is a luxury you cannot afford," Master Wong said firmly. "What happened was not a failure. It was education. The question now is what you do with that education." That evening's class was different from any Marcus had experienced before. Instead of feeling frustrated by the slow pace of basic techniques, he found himself fascinated by the subtle details Master Wong emphasized. Every correction the instructor made revealed layers of complexity that Marcus had previously overlooked. When practicing basic stances, Marcus remembered Commander JD's explanation about weight distribution and mental calmness. He tried to apply these concepts, and while his execution was still imperfect, he could feel the difference in his stability and balance. "Better," Master Wong observed during a partner exercise. "You are beginning to practice with your mind engaged rather than just going through motions." The change in Marcus's attitude didn't go unnoticed by his fellow students. Sarah Chen, a green belt who had always been patient with beginners, commented on his improved focus during sparring practice. "You're moving differently," she said after a controlled sparring session. "Less rushed, more thoughtful. It's like you're actually thinking about what you're doing instead of just trying to win." Marcus had indeed been thinking more carefully about his training. Commander JD's lesson about fighting with understanding rather than emotion had fundamentally changed how he approached every aspect of martial arts. Instead of seeing sparring as a competition to be won, He began viewing it as a laboratory for testing his developing skills. 3 weeks after the demonstration, Marcus received an unexpected phone call at work. The caller identified himself as David Park, a sports journalist for the local newspaper, who had heard about the viral video of the Royal Guard encounter. "I'm working on a feature article about martial arts in our community," Park explained. "Your story has become quite well known among local practitioners. Would you be willing to share your perspective on what happened?" Marcus hesitated. He had been trying to move past the attention and focus on his training. "I'm not sure I'm the right person to interview. I'm still just a white belt who got in over his head." "That's exactly why I want to talk to you," Park insisted. "Most martial arts stories focus on champions and masters. Your experience represents something different, the journey from overconfidence to genuine learning." After discussing it with Master Wong, Marcus agreed to the interview. The conversation took place at the academy, with Master Wong present to provide additional context about Marcus's development as a student. "What motivated you to challenge a Royal Guard with only 2 months of training?" Park asked. Marcus thought carefully before answering. "Honestly, arrogance. I had always succeeded at things through natural ability and determination. I thought martial arts would be the same, that I could somehow make up for lack of training through sheer willpower." "And what did you learn from the experience?" "That martial arts isn't about winning fights or proving how tough you are. It's about understanding yourself and developing skills that take years to master properly. Commander JD could have humiliated me completely, but instead he turned my ignorance into a learning opportunity." Master Wong added his perspective to the interview, explaining how Marcus's experience reflected broader misunderstandings about martial arts and popular culture. Movies and television create the impression that martial arts is about spectacular fighting and dramatic victories, Master Wong explained. "In reality, it is about patient cultivation of skill, wisdom, and character." Marcus learned this lesson in a very public way, but his response to that lesson has been exemplary. The article, published the following week, resonated with many readers who had their own stories of overestimating their abilities in various pursuits. Marcus received several emails from people sharing similar experiences in sports, business, and other fields where confidence had exceeded competence. One email particularly moved him. It came from a teenager named Alex Rodriguez, who had been considering quitting martial arts after struggling with the slow pace of learning basic techniques. "Your story helped me understand that everyone starts somewhere," Alex wrote. "I was getting frustrated because I thought I should be progressing faster. Seeing how much you learned from being completely outmatched made me realize that maybe I'm being too impatient with my own development." Marcus decided to visit Alex's martial arts school to meet him in person. The conversation that followed reminded Marcus of his own journey and reinforced his growing understanding of martial arts as a community rather than an individual pursuit. "The hardest part for me was accepting that I didn't know anything," Marcus told Alex. "Once I stopped trying to prove myself and started trying to learn, everything became more interesting and more enjoyable." The ripple effects of Marcus's experience continued to spread through the local martial arts community. Several schools began incorporating discussions about humility and realistic expectations into their beginner programs, using Marcus's story as an example of how setbacks could become opportunities for growth. Commander JD, who had returned to Thailand shortly after the demonstration, sent a letter through the Thai Cultural Center expressing his appreciation for how Marcus had represented their encounter. "To the media and the community, your student has honored our interaction by using it as a foundation for genuine learning, rather than as an excuse for giving up," the commander wrote to Master Wong. "This reflects well on both his character and your instruction." As Marcus's training continued, he found himself becoming a resource for other beginners who struggled with similar issues of impatience and unrealistic expectations. His willingness to share his own mistakes and lessons learned created an environment where other students felt more comfortable acknowledging their own limitations and focusing on gradual improvement. The transformation was perhaps most evident during a belt testing session 6 months after his encounter with the Royal Guard. Marcus had been invited to demonstrate his progress before a panel of senior instructors from various local schools. 6 months after his encounter with Commander JD, Marcus stood before a panel of senior instructors for his yellow belt testing. The same demonstration area where he had been so thoroughly outclassed now felt like familiar ground, though his perspective on what constituted success had changed dramatically. The testing panel included Master Wong, the head instructors from 3 other local schools, and Jennifer Walsh, who had recently earned her black belt and was observing as part of her instructor training. Marcus felt nervous, but it was a different kind of nervousness than he had experienced before. The Royal Guard demonstration focused on performing his best, rather than on proving his superiority. Marcus, "Chen," announced Master Kim, the senior-most instructor on the panel, "please demonstrate your basic forms." As Marcus moved through the kata he had been practicing, his movements showed the careful attention to detail that had become his trademark since the encounter with Commander JD. Each technique was executed with mindful precision rather than rushed aggression. His stances were stable, his transitions smooth, and his breathing controlled. The panel watched approvingly as he completed the form. While his techniques still clearly marked him as a junior student, they demonstrated the kind of foundational understanding that promised strong development in the years ahead. "Now please demonstrate self-defense techniques with your partner," Master Kim continued. Sarah Chen, now a brown belt, joined Marcus on the mats to assist with the demonstration. As they worked through various scenarios, defending against grabs, strikes, and holds, Marcus's approach reflected everything he had learned about timing, distance, and controlled response. "Excellent," Master Wong observed. "You are demonstrating techniques rather than trying to defeat your partner. This shows proper understanding of the training mindset." The final portion of the test involved controlled sparring with students of various skill levels. Marcus faced a yellow belt, a green belt, and finally Jennifer Walsh herself. In each encounter, his focus remained on applying proper technique and maintaining calm awareness, rather than on winning exchanges. Against Jennifer, the difference in skill level was obvious, but Marcus's approach earned respect from the observing instructors. He defended thoughtfully, attacked when genuine opportunities presented themselves, and accepted superior technique gracefully when he was outmaneuvered. "That's enough," Master Kim called after several minutes. "Marcus, please join us for evaluation." As Marcus waited while the panel conferred quietly, he reflected on how different this experience felt from his disastrous encounter with the Royal Guard. His nervousness now came from a desire to demonstrate his learning rather than from a need to prove his natural superiority. Jennifer approached him during the brief break. "You've come a long way from the guy who thought he could take on a Royal Guard," she said with a smile. "I'm a completely different person than I was 6 months ago," Marcus replied honestly. "Sometimes I can't believe how arrogant I was. Arrogant maybe, but also brave. And more importantly, educable. Not everyone who gets humbled that thoroughly responds by actually learning from it." Master Kim called for attention as the panel completed their evaluation. "Marcus Chen, step forward." Marcus approached the panel with his heart racing, though he tried to maintain the calm demeanor he had been practicing. "Your technical skills have progressed appropriately for a student of your experience level," Master Kim began. "More significantly, your understanding of martial arts principles and your attitude toward training have shown remarkable development." He paused to consult his notes. 6 months ago, you were known primarily for a viral video that showed a white belt challenging a Royal Guard. Today, you are known among local instructors as an example of how proper attitude and dedication can transform initial mistakes into valuable learning experiences. Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks, but this time it was from pride rather than embarrassment. "We award you the rank of Yellow Belt," Master Kim announced, "with the recommendation that you continue to share your learning journey with other students who may benefit from your experience." As Master Wong tied the new yellow belt around Marcus's waist, applause broke out from the assembled students and instructors. Marcus felt a deep sense of accomplishment, not because of the belt itself, but because of what it represented, genuine progress earned through humility and dedicated effort. After the ceremony, Marcus was approached by several people who had heard his story and wanted to share their own experiences with overconfidence and learning from failure. A young businessman talked about a disastrous presentation that had taught him the importance of thorough preparation. A college student described how academic struggles had forced her to develop better study habits and seek help from professors. Your story resonates because we've all been there, explained Dr. Patricia Martinez, a psychologist who trained at Master Wong's academy. The specifics are different, but the pattern is universal. Overconfidence leading to failure, followed by either defensiveness or genuine learning. You chose the harder but more rewarding path. As the evening wound down, Marcus found himself in conversation with Alex Rodriguez, the teenager who had emailed him after reading the newspaper article. Alex had driven with his parents to attend the belt testing, curious to meet Marcus in person. "I wanted to thank you," Alex said. "Your story helped me stick with martial arts when I was getting frustrated. I just earned my orange belt last month." "That's fantastic," Marcus replied. "What changed for you?" "I stopped comparing myself to other students and started focusing on my own improvement. Just like you learned to do after your experience with the Royal Guard." The conversation reminded Marcus of how his personal journey had somehow become meaningful to others facing similar challenges. What had begun as a moment of spectacular overconfidence had evolved into a story that helped other people approach their own learning with more realistic expectations and better attitudes. Later that evening, Master Wong pulled Marcus aside for a private conversation. "I am proud of your development, both as a martial artist and as a person," the elderly instructor said. "Your encounter with Commander JD could have been devastating to your confidence and your interest in training. Instead, you used it as a foundation for genuine growth." "I had good guidance," Marcus replied. "You and Commander JD both helped me understand what I was doing wrong and how to do better." Guidance is only valuable when the student is ready to receive it. Many people in your position would have made excuses, blamed others, or simply quit training altogether. You chose to listen and learn. Master Wong paused thoughtfully. "I have a proposal for you to consider. Our school is starting a new program for adult beginners, people who may have similar misconceptions about martial arts that you had. Would you be interested in helping to teach these classes?" Marcus was surprised by the offer. "I'm only a yellow belt. What could I possibly teach?" "You can teach the most important lesson of all, that martial arts is a journey of gradual development that requires patience, humility, and proper guidance. Your experience gives you credibility with students who might otherwise resist that message." As Marcus drove home that night, his new yellow belt carefully folded on the passenger seat, he thought about how completely his understanding of success and achievement had changed. 6 months earlier, he had measured himself against others and focused on winning. Now he measured himself against his own previous abilities and focused on learning. The viral video of his encounter with Commander JD continued to circulate online, but its meaning had evolved. What had initially been viewed as entertainment, a cocky beginner getting his comeuppance, had become something more valuable. A real-world example of how failure could be transformed into wisdom through the right attitude and guidance. Marcus's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. The message was brief but meaningful. "Saw your belt testing video online. Congratulations on your progress and your journey. Commander SJD." As he pulled into his driveway, Marcus realized that his story was far from over. The yellow belt was just another beginning, another opportunity to learn and grow. The young man who had once believed that 2 months of training qualified him to face elite warriors had become someone who understood that true mastery was measured not in victories over others, but in the continuous process of becoming better than he had been the day before. His journey, from white belt arrogance to yellow belt wisdom, had taught him that the most important battles in martial arts and in life were not fought against opponents, but against his own limitations, misconceptions, and ego. And unlike his encounter with the Royal Guard, these were battles he was finally equipped to win.